Welcome back, everybody. This video will be dedicated to show you where everything lies in the arm, especially muscles of the arm here. And so I will discuss first the muscles of the arm just above the elbow, muscles of the forearm, and some muscles within the hand here. I will try my best to also cover the origins and insertions for each muscle. It's going to be a long video, so I hope this works for all of you because it's really nice to just have everything in one place. Okay, so before I start discussing these arms, I'll just clear some muscles here on the top. And so maybe it's some good revision for some of you. Okay, so here we have this muscle here, pectoralis major. That's just muscle of the chest. I just want to clear those up so that you guys see where things start here in the upper arm. That here is the platysma. That's the deltoid. This one is the pectoralis minor. Okay. This muscle right here is the subscapularis, found in the costal surface of the scapula. I'm going to hide this one. Then here is the supraspinatus, found in the supraspinous fossa of the scapula. Infraspinatus, found in the infraspinous fossa of the scapula. That's the teres minor, teres major. Okay, just want to clear the arm completely. So here is the latissimus dorsi, and I want you to also look where it lies here. There, it's a huge muscle, so I'm just going to hide this one as well. And so I will just go down the arm hiding things so that you guys see what's the most superficial to the most deep. Okay, now that our arm is completely on its own, now I'm just going to dive into muscles of the arm just found above the elbow joint here. So you guys know that anteriorly a flexor big muscle is called the biceps, very famous. And so it has two heads. That's the short head, and that's the long head. The short head is found more medially. The long head is found more laterally. And so the short head right here, it originates from the coracoid process of the scapula and inserts into the radial tuberosity. Okay. And the nerve, the action, it's of course flexes the elbow joint. Nerve supply is the musculocutaneous nerve. Arterial supply is the brachial artery. And so that's where it's located. The long head of the biceps, the origin is the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. You see that right there, superior to the glenoid cavity. Insertion is the radial tuberosity, same as the short head. Action, flexion as well. Nerve supply, musculocutaneous nerve, and the arterial supply, brachial artery. And so that's the insertion, that's the radial tuberosity. Okay, that's the arterial supply for it. The flexion, the brachial artery, and you will study about it. It's the continuation of the axillary artery. And the nervous supply is by the musculocutaneous nerve. Okay, so now I'm going to hide both of those heads and just show you what's underneath. So we have two things here. We have the brachialis muscle and the coracobrachialis. To start with the coracobrachialis, we have the origins. It's here from the coracoid process of the scapula. It inserts onto upper 1/3 of the frontal humerus, like frontal part of the humerus. Action, also flexion, adduction, and internal rotation of the forearm, of the arm above the elbow. The nerve supply is also the musculocutaneous. The arterial supply is the brachial artery. Okay, that's the coracobrachialis. Hide it. Next one and the final one on the anterior aspect of the arm above the elbow, we have the brachialis muscle, and so the origin and insertion. So the origin is on the distal anterior surface of the humerus. The insertion of this muscle here is on the coronoid process of the ulna. Okay, somewhere here. And the action is flexion of the elbow to flex the forearm. The nerves, the arterial supply is by the brachial artery and radial recurrent artery. And also the nervous supply is by the musculocutaneous. So that was the brachialis. I'll hide this one. Then we're going to go on to the posterior aspect, where we find a large muscle that has 3 heads called the triceps muscles. This part right here is a tendon of the triceps muscles. I'm going to hide it, and so we dive into the heads. Here, the triceps has a lateral head on the most lateral aspect. This one right here is a long head. Okay. And finally, you have the medial head just below them. And so likewise, we have an origin and insertion of the triceps brachii lateral head. The origin here is the posterolateral aspect of the humerus, proximal to the radial groove and the lateral intermuscular septum. So radial groove is found more around this region, and it's proximal to that. Okay, insertion is on the olecranon process of the ulna via the triceps brachii tendon. Okay, action is extension of the elbow to extend the forearm. Of course, the triceps are acting opposite to the biceps, so they extend the elbow joint. Nerve supply is the radial nerve. Okay, the arterial supply is the deep branch of the brachial artery. And so that's the lateral head, the long head. The origin is on the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. Insertion is on the olecranon process of the ulna via the triceps brachii tendon. And the action also extension, just like the other heads. Arterial supply is by the deep branch of the brachial artery, and the nerve supply is by the radial nerve. Okay? So we're going to hide those two and then look at the medial head. The origin right here is on the posterior medial surface of the distal humerus, below the radial groove and the medial intermuscular septum. Okay, and the insertion of it is on the olecranon process, just like everybody, through the tendon of the triceps, just like the other heads. Extension, of course, and the nerve supply is the radial nerve. So that was the triceps, and so these are basically the muscles of the arm, just above the elbow. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the forearm, and so on the forearm you have the anterior compartment made up of flexor muscles, and the posterior compartment on the posterior aspect is made up of the extensor muscles. And so these, we're going to dive first into the flexor ones. And so the flexor ones are mainly made up of superficial layer, the middle layer, and the deep layer. I'm just going to remove this part right here. And so these are separated into those 3 layers, and so you are required to know those 3 layers. And so depends on what professor you have. Sometimes they want you to know it on real specimens, and so I will make sure to put, or remind me if I forget, the video that I studied from. There's a video on YouTube that I studied from that has real specimens, and people are pointing those muscles on the real specimens. Okay, and that's important. You have to study this aspect of those muscles and the real aspect. Okay, let's go into the flexor muscles. And so just remember that we have 3 layers in the flexor muscles, and I'm going to dive into the first layer. The first layer is the superficial layer of the flexor muscles, and this one right here is called the flexor carpi ulnaris, because remember, it's close to the ulna. Okay, flexor carpi ulnaris right here. Then we have the palmaris longus. Then we have flexor carpi radialis, and finally pronator teres. Again, just know how they're situated. Now I'm here near the medial aspect, okay? Near the ulna. I'm near the ulna. So the first one that meets me on the inner aspect of my anterior compartment of my arm is the flexor carpi ulnaris. Then comes palmaris longus. Then comes flexor carpi radialis, closer to the radius, okay? And finally, we have the pronator teres. Let's just dive into them separately. The origin of the flexor carpi ulnaris on the medial epicondyle of the humerus and inserts on the pisiform hook of hamate and the base of the 5th metacarpal. Okay, and they're labeled for you right here. That's the flexor carpi ulnaris. Okay, action, flexion of the wrist. So it will flex the wrist and adduct the hand. Adduct the hand. So that is towards now if I have my hand like that, so it adducts the hand. Okay, it gets it closer to the body. And so arterial supply is by flexion of the wrist and adduction of the hand. The arterial supply is, wait one second, so that's the ulnar artery, I think. Okay, and so the nerve supply is by the ulnar nerve. Okay, there, ulnar nerve. Okay, so that's the flexor carpi ulnaris. Sorry, my brain is functioning on a slow rate because these muscles are very, very like they require high brain functionality. So I'm taking it really slow so I don't mess up things. Okay. Now, the next one we're going to talk about from the most medial aspect to the lateral aspect. Now, the second one that meets us is the palmaris longus. The origin is on the medial epicondyle of the humerus and insertion palmar aponeurosis. There's an aponeurosis that is found on the medial on the palmar aspect of the hand, and that is where the palmaris longus inserts. Action tightens the palmar aponeurosis, flexion of the wrist, weak flexion of the elbow joint. And then nerve supply, median nerve, arterial supply, ulnar artery. Variation, the palmaris longus is absent in approximately. So sometimes the palmaris longus is absent. Okay, next. All right, so that's the palmaris longus. The flexor carpi radialis. Flexor carpi radialis, also medial epicondyle of the humerus. Okay, and then it goes on to insert on the base of the 2nd and 3rd metacarpal bones. So that's the position of it. The origin is there, and then the arterial supply is by the ulnar artery, nerve supplied by the median nerve. So what it does, it does flexion of the wrist and abduction of the hand. Finally, we have the pronator teres. If you isolate that and look at it, it originates from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, inserts into the lateral radial radius distal to the insertion of the supinator muscle. There's a muscle that is called the supinator that you're going to see in a bit. It inserts just below that. Let's say the action, it has a weak flexion of the elbow and pronation of the forearm, and the nerve supply is the median nerve. Okay, and and the arterial supply is the ulnar artery. Okay, there. So this is the most superficial layer of the flexor muscles. I'm gonna hide them and then look at the middle layer. Hide, 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 hide. This muscle right here, if you're wondering what this is called the brachioradialis. Is part of the extensor muscles, but it's found in the flexor compartment, but also in the extensor compartment, but it does more of extensions. Okay, the middle layer of the flexor muscles that are found in the anterior compartment of the forearm, here is the flexor digitorum superficialis. And if you see, and it's so easy to note this muscle, the flexor digitorum superficialis is the muscle that has control over the digits 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you see, it is so easy to notice this. It can be confused with the muscle that is found deeper to it, the flexor digitorum superficialis in yellow. You see the ends of it forms two extensions like that, and between them comes out another muscle called the flexor digitorum profundus. Okay, so when a professor points at the flexor, at the muscle on the top part, right here at the top part, just make sure to check that it has two endings, and the yellow is the flexor digitorum superficialis, and between them comes out the flexor digitorum profundus. Okay, so that they don't confuse you. I'll show you how this happens. So that's the flexor digitorum superficialis, and that's the only one in the middle layer. Hide. Now we go to the one that is found to exit the tunnel formed by the superficialis. It's called the flexor digitorum profundus of the hand. Okay, this is the first muscle found in the most deepest layer of the flexor compartment muscles of the forearm. Okay, flexor digitorum profundus. When I hide that, I'll see flexor pollicis longus, and this one is only in charge of flexing the thumb. The profundus and the superficialis flex the digits, and this one flexes the thumb. So hence pollicis. Pollicis is thumb. Hide. Finally, you have the quadratus. Three muscles in the deepest layer of the flexor muscles of the forearm. All right, that's the flexor layer, flexor muscles. Now, extensor muscles are found in the posterior compartment of the hand, and so it starts like that with the brachioradialis. Then comes the extensor carpi radialis longus, and then just below that, I think, is the extensor carpi radialis brevis, longus and brevis. Okay. Then comes the extensor digitorum of the hand, and finally the extensor carpi ulnaris. This is the most superficial layer of the extensor muscles. Brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor digitorum of the hand, and finally the extensor carpi ulnaris. Now, if I hide them, the most superficial ones, that's the brevis. Oh, sorry. That's the brevis. Hide the digitorum, and hide the ulnaris. Now we go to the deep layer of muscles of the extensor compartment. The extensor compartment is made up of two layers, the superficial and the deep. And so in the deep, we find muscles such as, sorry, this is one of the superficial, yes, the digiti minimi. Let's hide it as well. So remember, you have the brachioradialis, the extensor radialis longus, extensor radialis brevis, extensor digitorum superficialis, extensor digitum minimi, and the extensor carpi ulnaris. Okay, these are in the superficial layer. The deep layer, you have things like supinator, anconeus, abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, extensor indicis. And these are the deep muscles of the extensor compartment. Okay, now we're done with the forearm, and hence you see that there's nothing left. We're going to dive into muscles of the hand. Near the thumb here, this region where you see a bulge, there's two bulges here, and we're going to dive into those two bulges first. The bulge near to the thumb, the first most superficial one, is the abductor pollicis brevis. Okay, hide. We have opponens pollicis. We have flexor pollicis brevis. Okay. Then the other bulge near the digitum minimi, the pinky finger, we have first palmaris brevis. Then we have the abductor digitum minimi of the hand. And finally, flexor digitum minimi brevis of the hand. Okay. There's a couple more muscles that are in relations with the thumb itself. On the deepest end, we have here adductor pollicis oblique, because it's in the oblique position, it runs obliquely. We have adductor pollicis transverse, and on the dorsal aspect here, it's the first dorsal interosseous of the hand. Okay, so now what we're left with, sorry, that's my prayer call. What we're left with are the interosseous muscles and the lumbricators. And this one here, right here, yes, that's the opponens digitum minimi. I'm just trying to get to the interosseous and the lumbricators. On the palmar aspect, you have lumbrical muscles. You have first, second, third, fourth. And so when I hide them, we're left with interosseous. This one, sorry. First, second, third, and fourth. We hide them. The ones that I hid in the beginning were the dorsal interosseous, and these are found on the palmar aspect, the palmar interosseous. And so this is the end of our upper limb muscle reading. I think you have an idea of where everything lies right now. Maybe in the next video, maybe when I discuss cutaneous stuff about the upper arm, I will maybe give you a summary from my notes that I have in the book. And so let me know if you have any questions. I hope this video was successful. Maybe I've made some mistakes here and there, but I apologize. It's a very intense video. and I hope it helps. I'll see you guys in the next one.